I've been talking to a lot of people, and one of the things that I hear a lot is people have tankxiety. What's tankxiety? That is the anxiety of tanking. Um, as you can see, I have all four, excuse me, tanks leveled. I apologize if you hear popping and banging. It is the 4th of July. People are shooting off some fireworks right now. I have all the tanks leveled. I do not main a tank this expansion. I have many times in the past. Um, just an FYI, a little bit about my past. As people know, I've played World of Warcraft since vanilla. I was a prot warrior, uh, main through vanilla clear up until Legion, where I switched up my main class from. I went to Protection Paladin, then back to Prot Warrior. Prot Warrior kind of felt clunky, so I moved over to Vengeance Demon Hunter. That being said, um, here's some of my logs. Here's a picture of my logs for Vengeance Demon Hunter. The reason I'm not showing my characters because this is from the previous expansion. Previous expansion. I'd rather people not look up my character's name and try and critique things. It's not worth it. As you can see, these are all mythic logs. That's a 95 for Trilliax, Star Augur, and Croesus. The only one that's a blue as the best percentage is Scorpion. There was no way I was going to get that just because of the strat our guild ran. And all of my percentiles besides Tichondrius and Scorpion were purple. So I know a thing or two about tanking. You know, you could say, well, WoW tanking is different than 14 tanking, and I would just laugh at you, to be honest with you. There is zero difference, really, when it comes down to the nuts and bolts. We're not going to talk about the intricacies of playing a Dark Knight or a Gunbreaker or a Warrior. We're going to talk, because I don't know them. We're going to talk about getting over that tankxiety. The first and foremost thing is people get scared because people, you hear this all the time in Discord. Oh, this tank sucks. This tank, yeah. Well, a lot of that, and I compare this to a lot of other things. It is tanks not understanding what their job is. So tanks have a couple jobs. Just like DPS have a couple jobs and healers have a couple jobs. First and foremost, a tank's job is to hold the ads in place. In Final Fantasy 14, there are positions. So I main right now Dragoon, and next tier I will be raiding Ninja. So maining Ninja, excuse me. So I know what it's like when a tank's spinning a boss, doing this number. It is infuriating trying to hit a positional when the tank is just spinning. Okay. The next job is to stay alive. So there is ooh, that's what's happening. I need to close this other game. Sorry. I was wondering why I was getting some frame lag. My computer should not frame lag on fucking Final Fantasy 14. So, I had a Steam game that's been open for probably 2 or 3 days. Probably starting to fucking kill the memory. So, that being said, your next job is to stay alive. And a lot of tanks don't understand when you go in there what's going to do the most damage. So, a lot of people will say, well, if I go in there, obviously the bosses do the most damage. False. Most bosses in almost every dungeon, with the exception of tank busters, tickle. And even when they hit you with a tank buster, it's like laughable amount of damage. It may, this tank is not geared to the teeth. He does have quite a bit of Eden Choir gear, just because I have spare stuff sitting all over the place because of our clears. So this guy's 490 as compared to some people that'd be 480. Nope, that is not what caused my frame lag. What in the fuck is causing frame lag for me? So I'm trying to figure out what's causing some frame lag here. I'm just going to start closing some stuff here, guys. Apologies. Take this over here. Nothing seems to be popping up. So I'm just gonna keep an eye on it. Um, so that being said, um, when it comes to Final Fantasy 14, the major damage you're going to take is actually when you do the bigger pulls. And that's when you actually need to know your cooldowns and use your cooldowns. So a lot of people, when I talk to them, they're like, "Yeah, I know my cooldowns," and I'm like, "Okay, name your cooldowns." And I don't need names. You can call this shield wall for all I care, because that's what it is. That's your shield wall. As somebody that played classic vanilla WoW, that's what we would call that ability, shield wall. This is one of your minor cooldowns. You've got this is a magic cooldown, so this is your anti-magic shell. This is a group, so this would be like anti-magic zone. This is your a tank fucking cooldown. And then you've got, reprisal, which is your AoE damage mitigation. But nobody, nobody ever tells me, hey, arm's length. Why would I say arm's length? Let's read that additional effect. Okay, let me push this down a little bit. Additional effect for arm's length: slow plus 20% when barrier is struck. So that slows everything down by 20%. So if everything is hitting you, you essentially take 20%, assuming no cast times or things such as that, in damage, because it'll hit you 20% slower. Now, this is actually going to not be a correct number. It will probably be a little bit higher than that number, because now that's going to extend longer. So if an enemy would hit you with a bigger buster type thing, I won't call it a buster because it's not really a tank buster, but a harder hitting attack, that extends how long it takes for him to cast said ability. So that is extremely important. So let's get rid of some of that Tankxiety. First and foremost, your job as a tank, as I've said, is to, stay alive. Know your abilities and know what they actually do. Read every line. Don't just read creates a barrier nullifying most knockbacks and drawing effects. Oh, okay. There is an additional effect on there that is huge. It's 15 seconds of a 20% slow. That is humongous. Now, does it work on bosses? No. But we really don't care about bosses. Okay? And the last thing that a tank needs to do is be able to guide the party. So, a lot of people are like, well, I could get lost in a shoebox. Okay, yeah, I've heard that one before. But let's be honest. Most dungeons in this game, if you were to pull up the map and just look at them, most of them are straight and linear. Like, if you just, like, oh, I don't know where to go. Click, open, be like, okay, I'm facing this direction. The path goes this way. Okay, I know where to go. Use a little bit of common sense. So, saying, well, that's really hard for me. Believe it or not, if you don't know where you're going, a DPS will point you in the right direction. And yes, they may be like, well, you don't know this dungeon. Be like, no, I just get lost easy. That's okay. Most people will laugh about that statement. There's nothing wrong with that. So for Tankxiety, one, go in with your friends. And when I say friends, I mean actual friends that, you normally play with. Don't go in there with, somebody that you kind of know in your FC that you think is a good person, but because you don't know how they're going to react. You don't know what type of person they are. You don't know if they're going to be like, oh my God, why are you so bad at pulling mobs? Da, 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 da. Because they're an elitist once they get into a fucking, group. I see it all the time. People have, two faces about it.
Come on, Benny. Come on.
So.
Come sit with your daddy.
Apologies, guys. My dog is freaking out because of the fireworks, so I'm trying to keep him calm. while the fireworks go off around him. Yeah, he's not gonna stay. So, what it comes down to is going with people you know that, you know, are good people and don't get into that elitist attitude. Play the game with them on your normal class. Most people, DPS or healer, you're comfortable with. Go in there, and if you hear them complaining about tanks all the time, they're probably not the person you want to take in. But if you go in there and somebody's, you know, just like us, you know, they know a bit, you know, here and there, they may give you pointers. There is nothing wrong with taking a pointer for somebody that knows. Now, there is a problem with taking pointers from people who don't know. So that's kind of my next subject is know who's teaching you. That's why I showed my logs at the beginning of this. I understand how to tank. I have done it since, you know, before most people in this game have started raiding. Not all, but most. You know, there are a few people that, you know, raided in EverQuest or, you know, raided, you know, right at the start of vanilla with me. So, but for the most part, I am probably one of the senior guys. I know it. I'm old. So think about that. When you've got somebody saying, hey, look, you should be provoking, or as I will probably call it later on in the video, taunting. That is a WoW thing. I apologize. I will use WoW terminology. I played the game for 15 years. You know, I'm not going to say voke. I'm going to say taunt. It's just who I am. But a lot of them be like, well, you should be voking on cooldown. Okay, let's read what voke does. Gestures threateningly placing yourself at the top of the target's enmity list while gaining additional enmity. So what it does is, let's say there is, the way enmity works is the same way hate works, is the same way threat works. It is, so it doesn't matter what game you go to, if you're playing in WoW, if you're playing in Final Fantasy 14, if you're playing Star Wars The Old Republic, they all at the end of the day play the same way. So getting rid of that Tankxiety is, you know, part of it is rating this. So the way threat works, enmity, hate, aggro, whatever you want to call it, it's a 1-for-1 ratio on damage dealers and healers. So the way it works is if I'm on my Dragoon and I do 10,000 damage, I got 10,000 threat, enmity, all of those, okay? Whatever word you want to use. So I've got 10,000 threat. Now tanks, while in tank stance, significantly increase enmity generation. Okay. So what that does is it puts a multiplier on your damage, which means instead of you doing, let's say, 5,000 damage and having 5,000 threat, and then the Dragoon being the tank, what it does is you might have a 1,000 point, you know, in WoW at one point in time it was 3,000 points, or a 3,000 times multiplier. So in other words, you hit the boss once, there was no way somebody's pulling it off of you. That has since changed. Threat generation has been lowered in WoW, and it is much closer to what threat generation is in, I would honestly say, would have been in like Heaven's Word. Now in WoW, this game has gone to the extreme end of the multiplier, where I could throw down a fucking salted earth and probably never lose threat. You would have to do 80 to 90% of the bosses or the mob's HP before he'll turn and even consider looking at you. So that's how that works. So what provoke does is, if you look at that as a bar graph, and somebody has 10,000 and you have 10,000 to 1, you're going to be on top. Boss is going to be, you know, looking at you. If you have 5,000 and the other person has 10,000, the boss is going to be looking at them. So if you're the tank and you've got 5,000 and they've got 10,000, you use Voke, what's going to happen is it gives you 10,001 enmity or threat. So what that does is it puts you on the top, but only for a heartbeat. So, with all that being said, you should never need to use Voke unless one, you lose threat, which you can. Like I said, if you're not AOEing or really paying attention to a mob, it's fairly easy to happen. Maybe something's out of your range and a spellcaster or black mage is over there just lighting its ass up. It can happen. The next thing is if you're doing a tank swap. And so for a tank swap, you're going to use, let's say, the other tank has it and I want it. I will provoke, he will shirk me. What shirk does is it diverts 25% of enmity to target party member. So what it does is, if I were receiving the mob, I provoke, that gives me the 10,001. I'm one above him. Then he diverts 25% of that, so now he's at 7,500, and I'm now at 12,501 threat. It gives you a buffer of threat. So that makes it so that there's no boss, spinning back and forth, because not all tanks are made equal. Some tanks are, better at doing DPS than others. Now, should you shirk on cooldown? No. That's a cooldown. That's a 2-minute cooldown, actually. So the best way to handle something, let's say the other tank, he's not the greatest. He tries really hard, but he's not the greatest. So what you have to do is you have to go in there, and you'll just go, boop, get rid of your tank stance. Now you no longer have that multiplier. Since he does have the multiplier, he will continue to just pull further and further ahead. And then when you feel like you've got a safe buffer, back on. Doesn't cost a GCD on any of the tank classes. Real easy to do. Understanding that the tank stance does nothing more than give you more enmity, it is huge. Okay? Now, most people aren't going to be using Shirk because most people have Tankxiety, are just going to go into a dungeon. Now, I highly suggest still making a macro. So my Shirk macro is right here. Just Shirk, AC Shirk 2. So if you're in a raid, if you are the tank, the first tank, second tank's going to be number 2 on the list. So it's going to shirk him every single time. Okay? You can also do a mouse over macro. You could just target him and shirk him. I highly suggest against that because you're then having to target your party member, shirk, then target the boss. This is an OGCD ability. It should be done in between your GCD and everything else. So highly suggest just saying screw it. I'm just gonna make a macro of some sort. Like I said, most people that have Tankxiety won't be doing that. So good God, my wife is blowing my phone up. That being said, understanding enmity, that scares a lot of people. What if I'm a bad tank? And I'm going to be very blunt with you, 99% of bad tanking comes from people just not understanding cooldowns. So we're going to run a quick dungeon. We're going to talk through how, an expert dungeon is run. Once I get everybody in. Okay. Alright, this is actually the dungeon I wanted because this allows for some fairly large pulls. Whereas the other expert dungeon doesn't give as many. So, first and foremost, if you get lost, like I said, it shows you the way. Now, as you guys can see, I just stand here, a couple of, I don't even know what that ability is called, unleashes, and I'm good to go on threat. They're not going anywhere. So, then you just run up to the next set of ads, pop cooldown. I'm going to use Arm's Length, because Arm's Length is a good cooldown to have in your arsenal. So, and as you guys can see, I'm just using AoE abilities to, keep threat, do damage, as you guys can see, as things are starting to die, I'm starting to take less and less damage. I don't need my cooldowns. I don't need to run, every single cooldown into the ground. Real simple. I have tank stance on. I'm holding threat. Standing still as much as possible. Now, obviously, if you don't want to stand in, bad. Don't stand in the bad. That's bad. So I highly suggest trying to hit at least 2 abilities because people like myself like to go ham from the get-go. And if I'm on ninja and I'm fucking going ham, I do a lot of burst. So another part of this is just understanding like your damage intake. One of the things I highly suggest is learning to smooth your damage intake. That makes your healer's life easier. That's all there is to it. It's not a hard concept. It really isn't. So, and don't freak out. So, like, if I were right now going to start freaking out about my HP, there's nothing that's none of my abilities heal me to save me. So, how do I, make sure that I fucking don't die? You just gotta trust your healer. If you die and you're using cooldowns now, which I should have probably used cooldowns there, but this healer seems to be competent. So I really don't need to use my cooldowns there. They kind of know what they're doing. And as somebody that plays Scholar, not regularly, but often enough, I understand what their idea is. So, as you guys can see, I'm just going in, going ham, using abilities. I'm not going to be using many cooldowns in here. There's just no reason for me to use cooldowns in here. It's really just the honest to God truth. I always like to keep one plunge or whatever your gap closer is ready. Because I personally, and I fucked that all up. So if you get a couple Vuln stacks, which, on this fight, who doesn't? Popping a cooldown now during Vuln stack time is probably a good idea. I don't know why I'm getting some frame lag. I'm going to have to restart my computer after this. I don't know if you guys are seeing it, but I am. So, if you could see what how this is going, it's really simple. So, as you can see, I used Darkest Night, or is that what it's called? Yeah, Blackest Night, excuse me. For a tank buster. Not ideal, but I also, what the hell? I also don't think it's a bad idea. Okay, Monk, you don't need to be here. Okay. Yep, knew that was going to happen, but I would rather take that debuff there. So, and you can see I started to get low on health. I knew I was out of range of the healer. I was getting auto-attacked by the boss. So what did I do to help with that? Instead of freaking out, I hit a cooldown. I knew that I could hit my shield wall ability, and for the most part, that's going to take his damage down to next to nothing. So that's kind of how you got to look at your abilities and say, hey, look, how am I going to handle this, instance? And I'm really sorry for any, hiccups. I don't know why I'm getting random frame drops. I shouldn't be. Now, as you can see, this person now has threat. They ran ahead. Stand in front, use an ability. I just pulled threat on every single thing. You just got to stand in front. That's all you got to do. Be the shield wall. That's kind of what I told people back in Vanilla WoW. Be the shield wall. Now, as you can also tell, I am playing the most defensive tank for the most part. I mean, that's a debatable thing. Let's be honest. Some people will say Paladin. Some people will say, Dark Knight. I personally believe Dark Knight is the most defensive, and that is because of just the Blackest Night. Hands down, one of the coolest defensive abilities. Now, offensively, yeah, if it breaks, you get a free Edge of Shadows or Quietus. No, Edge of Shadows. No, you get a free fucking Blood Spiller or a Quietus. Excuse me. If I'm gonna open my mouth, I need to say the right things. Hello, Ian Cat. So this is actually one of the harder pulls. So knowing that's true, I'm going to, watch my health, and instead of freaking out, know that I can heal myself for a few thousand HP. Understanding pulls in a dungeon is pretty huge, to be honest with you. Hey, what's going on, Reza, man? Yep, I know who you are, Ian. Tober told me. So understanding pulls in a dungeon is 90% of understanding how where your cooldowns need to go. So for me, I kind of just, the first time I'll go in there, I like to go in as healer first and figure it out. So that'll give you a good judge of how much damage is going to come out, because I mean, you're healing the damage up. And as you saw, I just took a fucking tank buster to the face, and it was nothing. It took me down to half health from 3/4. It's a quarter of my HP. That doesn't scare me at all. If your healer's letting you get real low because they're going ham on DPS or something, then maybe you should say, hey, look, I need to stay higher, more cooldowns. But at the end of the day, it's really not that hard to say, hey, look, I know where my limits are. And that's really what it is. It's testing your limits. Man, after this, I'm gonna have to restart stream. Actually, I'm gonna have to restart my computer. Oh, I bet you I know what it is. I had Disney Plus up because me and my son were watching a movie. So, if you notice, I'm positioning myself as tight into that corner as I could. That was in hopes that the healer didn't take this one over here, because he really shouldn't, and that would give the monk room to be able to hit the boss. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. But that's okay. At the end of the day, I can't control every single person on the fucking on the game, so looks like the healer managed to make it. Oh, that's the wrong button. No. Another thing is understanding priority. You standing still is a priority over that healer. I don't care if the healer wants to be enclosed. There's no fucking reason for it. So understanding priority is very much important. It is more important that you keep that boss still and allow the DPS to do their job than it is for that fucking... Also, this is an increased enmity effect, so it doesn't hit hard, so your ranged ability, but it actually creates quite a bit of enmity, as you can see by the threat bars up there. So, that's why I say stuff like know your abilities, because knowing that I could just stand there and just essentially fucking, just let loose and keep running, or unmend and keep running, You know, there's no reason for me to, you know, stop and DPS and shit like that. I have threat on him. He's just swinging at the healer for some reason. So this healer's AFK. He doesn't get another. Yep. So that was on the healer. 100%. Cooldowns were used. Had a pop-up. What? You play it on, you know, Internet Explorer, buddy? So, understanding your cooldowns. There's nothing I could do there, but I did everything I should have because I held threat until I died. And that's a tank's job. So this pull actually has quite a bit of magic damage in it. So since it has magic damage, there's two ways to mitigate magic damage. A shield, Blackest Night, and then to actually reduce magic damage taken. Actually, there's a third way, also just to decrease all damage done. Which is, I should have said, because that is actually that is probably the best way. Because it is a percentage of damage done that is lowered. So one thing tanks have to understand is percent damage lowering with Reprisal is huge. The higher the number, the more you just saved your healers. So think about it like that. Now on this pull, I'm not going to lie to you, there is quite a bit of damage, but it's never scary type of damage. Unless your healer has a pop-up, apparently. So, honestly, with a decent tank, Selene, Eos, your fairy does enough healing that you don't really need to heal that much. I've run with a lot of really good tanks. I've run with a lot of really bad tanks. And it's very evident on how much healing I have to do based upon, you know, just the honest God truth on how much damage they're intaking versus how much damage, you know, they should be intaking. So if anybody has any questions, you know, feel free, pop them in chat. We're almost at the last boss. I might run a quick trial just to show you what it's like to tank with another tank. And that's why you always keep one of your leaps or gap closers available, because you don't want the boss to turn. I want that monk to sit there and just whack the piss out of it. So. Alright, I got one. That's why. One more. Oh, yep, that looks like that's actually what it was. That's stupid. Because I used to have that problem with Netflix. Now I gotta figure out why Disney Plus is causing that problem. Alright, guys. So, once again, triple weave in there because I play tank. I don't care. I want to get this stuff going. Is that the right answer? No. But, oh, I'm on the complete wrong side. Whoops. I was going to get that fucking free blood spiller. That's what it was. That's all it was. So our healer died. That's not no bueno. That's basically a wipe. There's no way I'm out healing this. It's just not happening. And sometimes that happens. You know, some people just misplay the situation. You can't get upset about it. You know, you get upset about it, and it just ruins your day. So I know a lot of people get upset about stuff like that. I typically try not to, just because it's not worth my time. I didn't do the best on the pull, so I look at it as a chance to get better at the pull. But overall, you guys can see, getting lost once again. This game literally, if you just follow it and go, hey, look, that's closed door, so I gotta go this way. If you just kind of look at it and just follow it, you will find your way to the end. So that's one thing, like a lot of people say, is I get lost. No, you don't. I don't believe that. So there's a lot of good tanks that, and especially in the FC I'm in, we've got Arc and Riza, who are extremely good tanks. So it's just one of those things, like, if you have questions, feel free to ask those people. These are going to be introduction notes. That's it. We're going to get rid of the Tankxiety. Going in there and worrying that you're going to fail, you saw me die. It happens. Okay. Okay, so. That was a better pull. I really should have started with okay, next thing is knowing cooldowns on stuff, knowing when things happen. If you know that an ability is going to come out here soon, watch animations, understand what the animations mean. Because if you know an ability is coming out, then you don't have to, necessarily be in position for it. You can literally say, hey, screw it, I'm going to be, off here doing what I should. Now, typically, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't typically run away for that ability. But this healer is a little bit weaker. So rather than take a Vuln stack and possibly, a death here in the next short while, I would rather say screw it and take the DPS downtime. I don't know if I'm in a safe spot or not. I was. Also being able to judge distance. You see how I managed to maintain him in my salted earth? That's just because I knew how far I was going to have to go and how far I can leap back in, at least approximately, so that I was able to keep him in salted earth, which is, kind of a huge deal. Like, I know it seems stupid. It's a low damage, ability, but every bit counts. One thing that a lot of people don't understand or they like to play off is, oh, well, I'm a tank. I'm not a damage dealer. Yet you are a damage dealer. I'm sorry to tell you. Every single person on the field is a damage dealer. That's just all there is to it. If you are playing this game, part of your job is to deal damage to the boss. So it is a boon to everybody if you maximize that damage. Now, am I maximizing it? God, no. I would ask Riza or Raptor how to maximize my damage. Whereas for myself, I don't really know. As I said, I'm not really maining tank this raid tier, nor will I be maining it next raid tier. But I do want everybody to feel comfortable playing a tank class. Because there's no reason to be, you know, scared. There is no reason to be, oh, well, I'm scared because, you know, this or that. There is absolutely no reason for that. I'll take the damage down now, because even if I die, most likely that's not going to be the death of the party. And you saw how few cooldowns I needed to pop. Like I said, it's about being comfortable in a tank job. There is no reason to be all frustrated. I think I'm actually going to give that to the monk. He seemed like he was doing a really good job. So, next is head on out. 2 comms. So we're going to do trial next. And this will be a chance for maybe for us to see what it's like to tank with 2 tanks. Depends on what trial I get. I usually get stuff that's fairly easy, so I doubt we're going to see anything that's, oh my god, hard. But you never know. Huh. Didn't know Alba had that darken. Not a huge fan. I'm not a huge fan of the dragon mounts. We'll see what they look like when the final mount comes out. Not a huge fan right now. Next is going to be, like I said, trials. We'll see what happens, but for the most part, it's the same thing. Either you're tanking or you're off tanking. If you're off tanking, you're a DPS. You should give the other tank a couple GCDs to get their threat established. Then you should be popping on tank stance and making sure that you stay below them in threat. That's all there is to it. There's really nothing else going on. This could end really poorly because I haven't tanked a lot of trials. Okay, innocence, not bad. Of course, we're going to wipe now that I said not bad. But, you know, that's whatever. Neither here nor there. Although I do need to take a pee, and I need to get ready for bed. Had a long day today, so... Okay. Or we don't get a countdown. Now, as you can see, even here, I'm not freaking out about cooldowns. I don't know what the tank buster's called, to be honest with you, so until I figure that out, probably going to be using a couple of abilities that I shouldn't. But we'll see. I should be geared enough. So, as you can see, even though none of the DPS are going to be able to touch the boss there's no reason for me to move him. Because as soon as I do, you know, if you move him, that fucks with what the DPS are thinking. Unless you're on voice comms, I can say, "Hey, look, I'm moving the boss." I typically go with the, "Hey, look, it's better to not move the boss." But that's me. And I haven't seen the tank buster yet, so... need to stop clicking on people. And this is why I say that every tank is also a DPS. Because if you don't believe that you're a DPS and you've got mechanics like this going on, you're full of it. That's all there is to it. You are full of it. You do not understand what a tank is. So, a tank is a DPS that gets punched in the face. That's all there is to it. It is also one of the few trial by fire jobs in the game. Tanking and healing are trial by fire. You're either going to be good at it day one, or you're going to have a lot of learning to do. And nothing wrong with either of those. There's absolutely nothing wrong with either of those. As long as you're open and receptive. If you're open and receptive, you'll do great. If you are someone that is not open and receptive, what you're going to start seeing is people start, not inviting you to stuff because, you're not trying to better the team. So, I actually am not tanking right now. Or am I? Yeah, I am. He just shirked me. So, once again, I don't even know what the tank buster is called, so you haven't seen me use many cooldowns. I just don't need to. The damage is, like I said at the very beginning, bosses until you start, hitting later in the game, like savages, they just don't hit that hard. Okay, this is coming this way, so. Let's readjust. Always try and face the same direction. Hey, Tober. Those are coming back through. So. So, as you guys can see, tanking is, I know a lot of people say it's scary, but I really don't see where people are coming from with that. Because at the end of the day, it really is, it's nothing different than DPSing. You're just getting punched in the face. And yes, I know I should be helping with the other ad, but there's no reason for me to be over there when I could be putting more DPS onto this ad. I probably shouldn't use... Now, that's one of the few occasions that I think using a gap closer is okay in that situation, because my gap closer is coming off cooldown before the boss is coming back. I don't know if this is true damage or magic damage. It looks magic. So we got Dark Missionary, Heart of Light. That was true damage, 100%. Also remember, your raid leader may have a certain spot that they want you to tank a boss. That is very important. Listen to your raid leader. I get a lot of that is, well, my raid leader wants this, and I think this is better. Your raid leader is doing all the extra footwork. If they don't believe that you're right, that sucks. But, at the end of the day, like, listen to what your raid leader says. Don't be that douchebag that's a know-it-all. Like, talk to your raid leader. I know specifically in my group, Please Repair, also Last Resort, I don't know why. But in Please Repair, we very much listen to each other. I help write guides. Shara is our raid leader. She makes all the raid calls. She decides things on the fly. I'm gonna put that. Yep. Never got a heal. So, and I didn't get my Living Dead off. So would that one be on me, or would that one be on the other tank? Or the healers. That one would most likely go to the healers. If I'm sitting at low HP for a while after a tank buster, and they just don't heal me, even though like I said, I didn't know what the tank buster's name was, so that is partially my fault. That is still on the healers. You have to understand, like, their job is to keep people alive. They need to understand what their instant cast buttons are, what their, you know, just basically, you know, it's. I'm not saying it's ineptitude, but a lot of healers just don't know what their buttons do, and it's. I won't say it's frustrating, but it's definitely not fun to have a healer who doesn't know what their buttons do. Oh God, don't look. There's a red mage decided to do that. Red mages should never LB3. I'm actually going to go with the other tank. He did a really good job picking up, knowing when to put on tank stance. So that's all there is to tanking. It really is trial by fire. If there are questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to ask. But on the long and short of it is, don't be scared. Go in there with people you know that are cool. Like I said, in my FC, we've got, you know, some really good tanks. You know, to call out Ark and Riza to be two of the best. They're very informative. They know how to tank. They're good guys. And if you do something wrong, they don't get, you know, oh, you suck on you. So I highly suggest finding people like that. I don't mind running dungeons with people from time to time. I'm not one of those guys that'll sit here and run dungeons all night, though. Excuse me. It is not my style. It's not what I want to do in the game. So, that being said, I think that's it, guys. I am going to cut it there. I'm going to go and upload this to YouTube. So my YouTube link's Nevin Simons, my real name. But I'm not really. This is more of an informative. I'm going to post it on my FC's Discord than anything else. I've been getting a lot of questions on, I've got Tankxiety. How do I, you know, handle that? So that's kind of the go-to. Understand your role. Let's go over everything again. Understand what your role needs to do. And that's stay alive. So know when to use cooldowns. Know which cooldowns work. Know which cooldowns don't. As you guys can see, I didn't know what the tank buster was. That's my fault. Going in there tanking, not knowing the tank buster, getting hit, smacked around real good by innocents. At the end of the day, if you live through it and you've got more than 2 or 3 seconds, that death's on a healer, in my opinion. That's just how I look at it. Should I have popped Living Dead earlier? Sure. You know, if I would have hit Living Dead earlier, I don't remember what type of healers we had, but I might have gotten a benediction. I love not getting any comms, even though I tanked the whole damn thing. So, long story short on that. Next, you need to keep the boss still, as still as possible. Now, obviously, if you're standing in bad, don't stand in bad. But if you can keep the boss as still as possible, that is another job. You want your melee DPS to hit every single positional without ever having to question whether the boss is moving, if possible. So if you have an opportunity to stand still, stand still. And really the last thing is you're a DPS. You're a DPS that gets punched in the face. So understand that you need to do damage. Don't be that DPS that's like, hey, look, don't be that tank that's like, oh, I don't need to do DPS. I need to focus on mechanics and be in a tank. You are a DPS. Your damage does contribute to the fight. It matters. Now, you always want to skirt the line of surviving versus putting out enough damage. If the tank buster just kills you outright, even through cooldowns every single time, you're probably in the wrong direction. If the tank buster does 5% of your life without cooldowns, you're in the wrong direction. You got to find that happy medium where, you know, you take a tank buster, you don't quite die, you're cool, not a big deal. So those are things to reduce Tankxiety. One, go with your friends. Um, Thanks, Ian Cat. I love my shield. Um, Go with your friends. Go with a group of friends that you've got. So if you got two people who don't know how to tank, bring one person in the group that does know how to tank, and make sure that they are, that type of person. It's like, hey, look, these are things that you can get better at. These are small things. Never take somebody's criticism that is legitimate, um, legitimate help as them trying to tear you down. There's a lot of people that do that, and that's just not fair to you or to them. Um, Understand when criticism's good. I had a hard time with this until, probably 2009. No, 2008. When I was tanking a lot more and Wrath of the Lich came. I had, a big problem where somebody told me I was doing something wrong. I didn't want to believe them. Turns out that they were fucking right. So, go figure. Let's see. Learn the dungeons, understand what you're doing. Go in there if you can as another class, and just pay attention to, go in there and watch one of your friends tank. So if you ask Risa to go in there and tank, and he's tanking, just watch what he's doing. Watch when he pops his cooldowns. You might not be able to tell, but the bar in the upper left hand where his buffs are won't lie to you. So tell him, hey, look, Risa, why'd you pop cooldown there? I don't understand. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. Now, if you're asking questions every single time, but it's definitely a good idea to ask questions, get a an understanding of what you're doing, and the last thing is just don't be scared. There's just no reason to be scared. Hi, Risa. There is no reason to be scared. So many people go in there. What if somebody says something about me? You probably will never meet this person ever again. Or if you do, they won't remember you. I know I don't remember 99% of people I go into any party finder with, any LFR, any of that stuff. I don't remember them unless they are toxic. If you're not being toxic and you apologize for your errors, I might make fun of you like I was making fun of that healer for the pop-up. But at the end of the day, that's about all you're going to get is a little bit of playful banter, and that's it. After that, nothing. So I'm going to call it on that. Remember those hints. Go forward and do stuff. Next, I do have one final thing that I did forget. A lot of people look at guides and say, I don't have half of these abilities. Honestly, let me be real with you. I can honestly go into a dungeon, use just Unleash and my single target combo, and that's it. Along with knowing when to use my cooldowns. You get this at 38, 8. You get arm's length at 32, 22. For the most part, you're getting most of your effective cooldowns early on. I can honestly go into a dungeon and use these 3 buttons, this button, and my cooldowns, and nobody would care. Nobody would give a shit. Now, would my DPS suck? Sure. But nobody would give a shit. You do not need every button on my bar to be able to tank. Honestly, just when you're looking at a guide, understand that it may be written for a level 80, but just go in there, go up to a dummy. What buttons do I have? Oh, I've got these buttons. Okay, this is my single target rotation. This is my AoE rotation. These are my cooldowns. Done. Okay, now that's it. I promise. Have a good night, everybody. Have a wonderful 4th of July, what's left of it. And love y'all. And I'll see y'all. Bye.